Before the start of a new semester, our motivation levels tend to be at an all-time high, especially if it's around New Year's and we're setting goals and resolutions and making all of these glorious plans about how we're going to completely change as people and have perfect habits and never procrastinate again. And then, unfortunately, as the actual semester starts, usually at least 1 to 2 weeks in, we start to realize that our motivation levels have completely dropped, and not only do we not feel like doing any work, we've just realized that we have an entire whole semester in front of us that we have to go through, and the end of the semester is months and months away. So as our classes pile up and the work gets more and more difficult, our motivation levels get lower and lower, and all of our resolutions and goals tend to just go out of the window, and we go back to being our old selves and pretty much just doing the bare minimum that we have to do to survive. So how do we get motivated enough to keep ourselves going and not ever really fall into a slump or periods of procrastination, and basically just overall stay motivated and work hard throughout the entire semester? So the first thing that you need to realize when it comes to self-motivation to study is the fact that grades in themselves are not really motivating at all. Unlike things like work or cleaning, where we usually get money, where we can spend the money on things that we like clothes or food, or with cleaning, where we get instant gratification, where we can actually enjoy our clean rooms and our organized space. Unlike those two examples, grades don't really impact our life in any shape or form. Sure, we have our A's sitting in some database somewhere, so whenever we study really hard and get a certain grade, we don't really feel anything really emotional. We just usually get relieved or happy we didn't completely fail, but it doesn't really impact our life or change our lives or really give us any emotions. And the flip side of this is the reason that we're so motivated to constantly spend time on our phones watching something or being on social media or hanging out with our friends rather than studying. The reason is we get instant gratification. In that moment, you are spending time with your friends or watching a movie and feeling good. You experience the emotions of happiness or laugh at something funny immediately in that moment, not 3 months later or 5 years later. And it's that realization that each grade is not really the end goal, but just a stepping stone to a larger goal, that is really important to first realize that grades in themselves don't motivate us. So even when we say our goal is to get straight A's, it's just not enough to get us to be motivated and work really hard right now. So once you really realize that, you'll start to realize that you need something a bit bigger than just grades to motivate yourself to study. So in a sense, our brain and our motivation is just like an onion. Yes, an onion. And our motivation levels have layers. So as you peel each layer off, you'll start to realize that the real motivation that will get you through all of your weakest moments and when you feel lazy is a lot deeper than just grades. So I recommend doing this in a journal or on several pieces of paper, since it can get pretty detailed depending on how many questions you ask. But pretty much the first thing that you need to do to figure out how to motivate yourself is to keep asking yourself why you're doing what you're doing. So after you set the goal of I want to get good grades, you ask, why do I want to get good grades? Why do I need good grades? What will they help me accomplish? And then once you've answered that question, you can ask, why do I want to be at the top of my class? Or why do I want to get into a good university? And as you start to question why you want to do what you want to do, you'll start to understand what your motivations are and how your brain works and where are you even going in the first place. which is really important because if you want to be motivated, you need to first know where you're going and what are you trying to motivate yourself to do. If you're going into a career path that you completely hate and you're only doing it just because it's cool or because your parents think it's good, the truth is you might just be self-sabotaging yourself and subconsciously trying not to get good grades because you simply just don't want to be doing what you're doing. And it might be better to just acknowledge that and realize, well, maybe I want to do something else in my life and work really hard at that rather than this path. So there can be a lot of reasons why you're not feeling motivated, and it could also be that you just feel lost and you don't really know what you want to do with your life, and it feels so overwhelming that you don't want to think about it and you just instead procrastinate and don't really work hard. And answering these questions can also help you realize what do you want to do with your life, or if even things like getting into a good university would maybe help you figure out what you want to do. You can even look at it as the more classes you take and the more opportunities you try and get good grades at, the more you realize which paths you want to follow and which subjects are interesting to you versus which ones are not. And as you can see, all of these questions can go in a lot of different ways, so there's not really one specific way you can do this, but just keep asking yourself different questions and trying to figure out how your brain works and what you really want from your life, and if you're doing what you're doing for yourself and what you feel really passionate about, or if you're just doing it for other people, which might not actually be motivating to you at all. It's at this moment that you realize what's really important to you, whose opinions are important to you. Maybe you really do respect your parents and you really love them and you agree with them that this certain path that you want to follow is important, so you do want to also make your parents proud, and that can also be a great end goal. And it really just depends on you and your situation. But the most important thing is to finally eventually get to that last line where you have that end goal. And that end goal doesn't have to be, exactly where you want to be 20 years from now. Actually, that might not be the best end goal because it's so far away that it's not even really visible to you and you don't really know what it's going to be like, so it's not very motivating. The best end goals tend to be pretty recent, so the next major step in your life. For instance, it could be university, or it could be entering into a certain career field, something that you can really imagine and envision in your head and see and imagine yourself there. The reason that this final thing that will make you really excited and passionate is that you need to have that vision of your future self constantly playing in your head on a daily basis. So you need to write it down in your planner, in your phone, think about it maybe every single night before you go to sleep, or write it down in your journal, and have it constantly running in your mind. The more you start thinking about that future version of yourself, so for instance, if it's you at a top college, the more you start to realize that each step that you're taking towards that end goal is super important. Each grade, each assignment, each test that you give is really important and just a small drop into the larger goal. The problem with our motivation levels is that usually what happens is we get sucked into today and we're just focusing on, I have to get an A on this next assignment, I have to do this, I have to do that, and we feel unmotivated because we're just focusing on how much work we have to do rather than why we need to do the work and where are we actually going. That way, the more that you focus on your future end goal, the more you start to break out of your laziness and procrastination, and you feel more and more excited that you're getting closer and closer to that future goal, rather than just drowning in all the work that you have to do now. And it also really helps you get out of a slump or any situation where you start to feel like your bad habits are taking over. And all of these questions might take a bit of a while, and it's definitely something that you might not be able to do in 1 to 2 days. It could take even up to a couple weeks to a month, but it doesn't take too much time. Just think about each question until you feel really confident about your answer, and just keep breaking it down more and more until you finally see a version of yourself that you would be really proud of and passionately feel like this is the best version of you that you can imagine at a certain stage in your life. And that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it interesting and helpful. This technique has definitely been really helpful for me. So that's all I have for today's video, and yeah, bye guys.